Hey guys, Double K here, and welcome back to some more Starblast. Today is kind of more on the serious topic, just because me and a group of friends were kind of discussing like the direction of Starblast. You know where it's going, what it's going to be like in the future, and we're basically holding a conference and talking about what are the things we like and don't like, what are the things that we'd rather have changed, and all that kind of stuff that's just going on. So, I'm being joined by ATK, Uranus, Kyle, Finalizer, and Karme. So, I'm muted and deafened right now on Discord, but I'm gonna let it up, and then ATK is gonna do his intro, and then we'll get talking.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy TK, and today I'm here with some friends. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourself, Uranus.
I'm Uranus. I made some mods.
I'm Finalizer. I made the U series.
I'm just Kyle. I'm just friends with Double K.
And I'm Double K, and I'm the third largest Starblast YouTuber.
I'm Karme. I am an OG Star Blaster. Came over from Daipyo.
All right, and today we got a few things we want to talk about. So go ahead, get a drink, get whatever you need, get a snack, because this conversation might get a little deep. Basically, we're going to be talking about where the game is headed. As you guys know, I had a sort of leave for maybe 2 months. It feels like it's only, I'm going to go ahead and say 2 months. And when I came back, let's just say I came back to
Mess.
pretty much a mess. A lot of things have changed since I've been back, since I've been around the community. I mean, I came back to some new updates, some of which I was a fan of and some I was not a fan of. And today we're going to be talking about that and hopefully discuss about like where is the game going and is it a good thing? Because I have to say there are a lot of updates that I'm not really happy with. So something else I want to discuss was the new nerfs. I've heard a lot of my fans know that I'm a fan of the Y Defender. I've been hearing from a lot of people that how Y Defender's been nerfed and everything since I've been gone. And I gotta say I'm not a fan of that. That's pretty much like the number one thing I was not a fan of. Then we talked about yesterday when we were talking about like actually setting up this little conference that we were going to do. We were talking about a lot of the updates that we all weren't a fan of, and I just wanted to go through some of these. I noticed that you guys talked a lot about some new updates that you felt the game needed, and so I would just want to get your guys' opinion on the updates. Like, how have the updates been since I've been gone?
I can update the viewers on what we talked about yesterday, which was
go ahead and update everybody.
Wine Defender, how the Wine Defender got nerfed. I feel like more recently, single Reddit posts on the subreddit have been known to make more of a difference than a large or like. What's going on is less people are asking for change, but the single ones that are asking for little modifications to the game, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're really good players that have been playing it for a long time. But people who are asking for small changes might have their voices heard a bit more to the devs, and for some reason they decide to reason with that small basis or that small part of the community that asks for those slight changes. And what ends up happening is we see a ton of these small minor edits, which for the players who have been playing for a very long time, this is a little bit weird, and like we don't like the updates usually, or at least the updates that are minor in the sense that someone's posted something on the subreddit or on the Discord and the devs listen to them. But the issue we have here is that minor players who haven't been playing for a long time might have a really bad game this one time and decide to post about like, hey, this one guy in a pulse fighter was absolutely destroying my game. Please nerf it. When in reality it's something like, hey, that player has been playing this game for a very long time and has gained the skills required to make that ship a very effective weapon. And so it's skill based problem here rather than it being an actual balancing error issue. Like if tons of ships were getting demolished by this Y defender on a constant basis, where it becomes a huge problem because everybody is using that one ship to demolish everybody, then we might have a problem with balancing, and then it should be looked at. But unfortunately, what's happening is that those smaller voices are being heard more than the older, the people who have more experienced with the game. And mainly because the people who are experienced with the game either have too many in real life things going on and aren't able to ask for updates or at least respond to them, or just aren't doing it in general as often as those other as the less experienced players are. So that is a little bit of a little glimpse into what might be causing the issue for these minor updates. And one other thing that happened to the game maybe a month or two ago was we went through 3 different ship trees in 1 month, and that was absolute insanity. And it was really hard to find or to figure out how to upgrade the ships. And that was because someone requested, hey, let's try out a different ship pattern or a different ship tree. And although it was weak tests, it ended up being, I don't know, I wouldn't say a little bit longer than that, but it's just we went through several variations of the ship tree instead of trying one for one single week this different ship ladder and then reverting to the original. And we had a ton of conflicts over people were saying, "Oh, I like this ship tree, let's keep it," and other people were saying, "Oh, this ship tree was horrible, switch it back." And that was a pretty big issue back then. But this, I believe, was before Modding Space came out, and ever since, it's changed a bit. Less of the vanilla modes are being played nowadays because of Modding Space, and because Modding Space has been drawing quite a large amount of the user player base, and that has definitely changed the game quite a bit.
So one of the newer updates that I've been hearing about is the anti-teaming update in survival mode. I personally have not seen it myself, but I've heard about it from other people. I was in a game with a friend of mine, and we were doing a basic team mode in survival. Well, we weren't exactly teaming. We went into the game together, basically with the intention of not really teaming, but we were just going to do our own thing. But then that's basically where I learned about. Basically, he said something along the lines of, "Let's not stay too close to each other, otherwise the new anti-team update is going to activate or something." Then I heard about how if like 2 players are in close enough proximity to each other, and they're aiming at the same target, one of the player's bullets will bounce off and go in like another direction. And I'm not sure I'm happy with that update. I mean, I've never seen it or experienced it, but I'm not happy with the fact that it's there. So how do you guys feel about this? Because I'm not sure if this is really fair for the game.
I think if there's a teaming option in the chat, then why should there be an anti-team thing?
Yeah.
That's my only thought.
I feel like
Yeah, that's great.
I feel like that update was totally useless and a waste of time on the devs' part.
I feel
survival mode has always been the same. It's always had teams now and then, and it's always had people complaining about the teams, but it's always stayed the same, and it's never gotten better or worse. And I think that's a good thing, that the teams can be balanced out by, the solo players and the skilled players. And like you said, ATK, the devs are listening to the smaller voices, and the smaller voices who have less skill than the veterans are saying, "Hey, we don't like teams. Get rid of the teams." And I feel like that it wasn't necessary to change that, because it's always been like that, and it was never a real giant issue. Like even after the SDF kind of retired and fell out of existence, uh, we didn't have an overabundance of teams. So that's all I'll say about that.
I see your point. What can I say? I do miss the old survival, but on the other hand, I support the bouncing lasers myself. So they are a bit OP, and they don't work all the time. They might attack the players they shouldn't attack, but all in all, we pretty much eradicated teaming. So, like, I miss teaming because I miss killing teams, fighting teams. It was a good challenge, but I support the bouncer lasers because less teams and it's a more fair environment.
Well, something that I
Oh, go ahead.
something that I thought was the point of contention was what people were talking about particular ships, especially the Y Defender. Like the Y Defender was so popular as a ship to gang up on people with because it was rather inordinately powerful. Like, and just maybe not by itself, but when you have several of them, and like the players spin their mouses to signify that they want a team, and they spam team emoji. When they do that, and they have that impromptu team going, they can totally overwhelm people who are trying to level up their ships, because ships follow a power curve rather than like a real exponential curve. Like, because the cost goes up so great for mining to get to the next level while the power band is so close, like you end up with ships that are too slow to evade a group of Y defenders, and then they can just overwhelm you every time. And every time you level up, if you drop below a certain score, you stop showing up as like the leader because you've mined the most. But then something that I noticed a while back was I was like right on the threshold of showing up as the leader or not, and then I would get killed because I was the leader. But then some of the teaming guys, because their ships are so inexpensive, will commit suicide in order to bring their score down so that they can hunt you again.
And also going along with the Y defender part, if like just as an example, say you're just mining and like 2 tier 3 Y defenders just come along, basically combine them together, it's basically a tier 6 ship versus like a tier 1 or tier 2, which is just completely unfair.
Like, especially depending upon how you aim with it, like just because of the Y defender is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And like I can take down somebody's tier 6 ship with one if they're not particularly good with it, and or before they've purchased upgrades. It's actually relatively easy sometimes to catch somebody unawares and totally overwhelm them.
Yeah, agreed.
But the anti-team updates, like say if and I'm just thinking like of theoretical possibilities. Say like 2 people are going after the same target, but they're not teamed, and one of their bullets flies and like kills a bystander that doesn't have, like they're just minding their own business. Like how is that fair?
Well, is that fair? They are attacking the same player together, maybe not intentionally, but they are still teaming, so one of them is gonna have to retreat.
I feel like survival mode will never be totally fair. There's no way for you to make it like completely fair and to try to make your best efforts and try to make it as fair as you can. I mean, there's a certain level that you can go, but when you go beyond that, you start dividing people, and some people like it one way and some people like it the other way, and it could cause more problems.
I think ultimately, given like some options that have already been discussed in the past, like one way that survival could be more fair would be to eliminate loss of ship. Like, so before survival mode, where it's battle for the last standing kicks in, people are trying to upgrade their ships, but then they get mauled repeatedly and then they lose a ship. And this discourages them from play. Ultimately, it creates a power creep where everybody ultimately fights at like level 6, and there's no real reason to stay below on lower tiers unless you're just challenging yourself. But I think that one of the best ways that could solve the problem would be for a lot of people to be able to reach level 6, because even if they get mobbed down, they're still that tier when they're fighting other players.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. So does this mean that we're ultimately moving towards a quote unquote communist Star Blast, where you're making the game more fair by making it unfair for the players that are ultimately better just because they're better at the game and have more skills?
Well, somebody who traditionally got like an O defender or a advanced fighter or Condor, or those particular ships were significant more so because of its tanky shield and getting up to level 7 fast. But the other ships, like when a skilled player uses them, they are able to fight off groups of other players because, like, especially with how much damage an advanced fighter can do, like you can end up killing off a player before they can fight you, and then your shield gets a chance to gets a reprieve because you're able to kill people faster than they can fight back. But then if they aren't losing their ships each time they die, then they have I guess then the leader would ultimately end up getting mobbed by people who just continuously return to the same fight. So I don't know. It's a difficult,
very confusing
position.
matter.
Could I butt in here?
Yeah.
So I guess returning this topic or the conversation back to the topic, addressing the changes that the developers have made in regards to gameplay. The issue I see is that it's really hard to address such a complicated mode where so many outcomes could be happening at once. So I'm just going to list off a couple. And so this is relating to teaming. So you could have on one hand where there is a group of pulse fighters which are absolutely annihilating the server, and they're all like ECP users, whatever. They're just absolutely annihilating the server. In that case, the game becomes less fun for those who are just trying to mine up and enjoy the game. And they're just getting constantly wrecked by these people who are dominating the server. So in that stance, teaming's kind of like, yeah, it's a bad thing. But on the other hand, let's say that this one person power mines their way all the way up to a Odyssey or some high or T7, and there's only a couple of survivors left, and they're relatively low tiers that don't stand as much of a chance. Let's just assume that they're not as good players, but they have numbers, but they have lower tier ships, and they're not as experienced with the game. In that case, I mean, the underdog, I guess, would be the group of players that remain as a survivor. And then teaming, I guess, would be considered good in that case. But something like if an Odyssey was fighting against like 5 lower tier ships and the bouncing lasers, let's just assume the Odyssey's primary cannon bounces off of one person and goes to another, that's going to really hold the side in favor of the Odyssey winning the match. But just the way that it's really hard to address a situation like this because, again, there are so many outcomes and so many ways that people can experience the game. And I guess in order to make this, or in order to benefit the game, I see it as that we need to make sure that the majority of players are having fun playing the game. That's how I see as the benefit of making updates to the game is how can we change it so that Starblast remains fun for everybody?
That is a very good point, and to be quite honest, it made me rethink the bouncing lasers. So yeah, I completely agree. Most anti-teaming systems that have been proposed, they mostly target the noobs that are trying to team. Because if you have the ability to voice chat with your teammates, and if you have enough skill, you can easily avoid bouncing lasers or anything else pretty much. You can just keep enough distance and yeah.
And
Yeah, another idea that I thought that could be helpful is if you keep getting mauled like multiple times, no one's really gonna like just downgrading their ship constantly. So maybe a little bit of idea could be to just stay the same tier that you're at, but if you have upgrades to your ship, then if you die, they take some away each time. That's what it's just an idea.
I think that the regular players who play Star Blast, like a lot of people like playing games with their friends and all that. So people are gonna want to play Star Blast together, and they're gonna want to team, not to destroy everyone, but just to team because they want to play together. So, like you said, with the anti-team groups that go for noobs, like they're going for the wrong people. They're just sometimes teams are just teaming to have fun and play together.
So I could talk a lot more about the updates, but I would also interested in talking a lot more about the mods that have been coming out lately, especially with the alpha version that's come out. You're seeing a lot more advanced mods that we didn't have before the beta version. And Uranus, I think there's more. Well, you and Finalizer, I think you both can talk a lot more about this. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand this to you guys.
All right, yeah, I can start this off. So when modding was released with the 3 primary mods, Racing, Battle Royale, and New Series, a ton of people just started playing those mods much more than the vanilla modes. And for quite some time, weeks, I'd say, it was the majority of the player base was playing those mods, Racing, Battle Royale, and New Series. And what's happened over time is that the player rates on both Racing and the Battle Royale mods have significantly decreased. And I think nowadays it's basically barely anyone is playing those modes. And what's happened, and although some players have returned to the regular vanilla modes, what's happened, or a problem I see with modding space is that some of those mods, like I'm just pointing out Racing and Battle Royale here because they're the major, I guess, problems with modding space that I can see, is that those 2 games I feel should be much more as events rather than actual permanent modes in modding space. Because when we back when Battle Royale and I guess Racing, just for a little bit, were weekend events, tons of players would come to play those modes because it was like exclusive. They were all new ships and different modes. It was just a new style of play. And the reason it was so special was because it's only for a certain amount of time, and then you'd have to wait about like a week or a month before you could play those again. And so that's what kept that specialness or exclusive specialness to those 2 modes. But once you kind of remove that that event, or just like once you remove it from being an event and have it be a permanent mode, it's that it doesn't become special after a while. It loses that it just loses that shine to it. And because they're meant to be events rather than modes that are constantly played all the time, especially Battle Royale, because there's a long wait time before a server fills up, and then finally the match starts. And that works really well for an event. However, a permanent mod is it doesn't really meet the qualifications, I would say. Like, permanent mods have to draw in quite a bit of players, like survival and team mode. And that's what's made the U series. That's, I think, what partially made the U series and Goldman's invasion mode so popular in modding space, is because those two can be played over and over and over again, and it's fun because it's those two, I guess, are meant to be more as permanent modes rather than events. But right now, I'd say that the modding space is taking about 41% of the user base, or the player base, if I'm not mistaken. But what's going on is just over time, people have been playing the U series and Goldman's Alien Invasion mod, and they're playing it quite a bit, but because it's permanent, it's slowly losing interest, I'd say. I mean, it's still popular, but it's losing that specialness or exclusive specialness to it. And modding space, I feel, would benefit more greatly if it was more of an event. Then I feel like we would be having less problems with Starblast as a game than it being a permanent mode. And I think I'm just lost my train of thought. Hold on. Uranus, do you have any?
So it's sort of like when you eat like a birthday cake. You know, it's a really special occasion, but when you eat it over and over again, it sort of loses that specialness. I think that's what you're trying to get at, and I very much agree. Like, I remember when Battle Royale came out, it was like a huge deal. Like, everybody was playing Battle Royale. Like, I would go into a survival mode, and there'd be maybe like 5 ranked people entire game, you know, just in the whole game, you know, as a whole. Like, that'd be like max people that would show up because everybody was playing Battle Royale, because that was the thing. But then once it became like a permanent mode where you could actually just set up Battle Royale anytime you wanted, like, it sort of lost that specialness, and people just sort of like lost interest. And I think this is something we talked a lot about yesterday too, when we were kind of like talking about setting this conference up and what we were going to talk about. This is something that we talked a lot about too, and I came up with this theory basically that I think maybe the developers are just us too much at a time, where well, there's a couple of factors, but the first factor being is the Starblast audience isn't big enough to catch up. Like, a lot of people are either just don't really understand how to create these mods fast enough, and then they're still, like, a lot of people were still learning how to do the beta version, and then they came out with the alpha version. Then at that point you could start creating your own game mode, but people were still stuck on the beta version, you know, creating their own ships and things like that, ship trees. So I think I came up with this theory that is basically like it's sort of like feeding a baby. Like, you don't feed a baby like a steak. You start out with baby food, and then you work your way to milk, cereal, and then you work your way up to this sort of thing. And I think they're just dumping all this on us all at once. I mean, I came back from my 2-month leave to a game that was drastically different than what I thought that it was going to be. By the time I came back, basically, I came back to a mess. Like, I really don't want to say that it's a mess, but that's pretty much what it is. I just felt like they dumped too much on the community to the point where it didn't make sense anymore. People couldn't catch up, and now all people can do is just sort of sit around and think about what's next.
Yeah, I just remembered something really critical that what we talked about last time. So I feel like, because not enough mods are being created for modding space for it to be a permanent mode. Because mods take months to develop, and only a handful of people in the entire Starblast community are able to create that level of mods that are worthy of being like a permanent mode. But even with that, a problem I see is that we don't have enough mods for it to be a permanent mode. Right now, the modding space window is set up so that there's supposed to be 6 mods, and yet there are only 4 which are available right now. I mean, sure, later on we might get the Blast Ball and maybe Kleinum's ship tree, but that's another thing I would like to talk about, which is the type of mods that are being made. A lot of people are able to use the ship editor and are able to create ships. That's great. But when it comes to mods, ship trees are probably the easiest things to make. In the sense that you can create all these
Balancing them are not so great, though.
Yeah, let me start that over again. But an issue that's going on is that it's easy to make modded ship trees, but when it comes to actual programming, once learning how to use the modding editor, such as creating objects, using emissive and spectral functions, and just being able to create 3D objects, implement them, and have events, functions, and knowing how to use all of them to create a much more advanced mod. Not a lot of people have that ability to use all of those aspects of modding to create some really unique mods. So what's going on is right now we're stuck with ship trees. And those are cool because we have the U series, we have Goldman's Invasion, that's fine. But what's going on is we can't really go off from there, because partly is that the devs haven't implemented as much into modding as we would be able to create. Meaning stuff like ship AIs, being customizable ship AIs, interactive 3D objects, that sort of thing. Once those are implemented into the game, then modding can just take off from there and go in absolutely wild. I'd love to see the possibilities from it. But right now, but the other thing is that those mods, again, take a ton of time to produce. And there are only so many people in the entire community that are able to produce that level of mods. And unless we do something like we do an enormous group training session where people really, really want to know how to create those mods, just learn it. And even if we do that, you have to learn an entire language of JavaScript before you can start making that level of mods and know exactly what you are doing. And sure, PMGL is streaming on Twitch every once in a while, modding space, and we just join his game, but we need a lot more people who know how to use the modding editor before modding space should have become a permanent thing. We needed a lot more mods. I'd say around 10 or 20 before modding space should have been a permanent thing. Until then, I feel like everybody would agree that modding space should have remained as an event rather than a permanent thing, because we didn't have enough mods. And so I think that lack of mods and lack of people being able to produce that level of mods is what kind of is a major detraction to modding space.
So
I'm gonna disagree with that. So the problem isn't the amount of mods. The problem is the amount of players we've got. If you have 20 mods, then divide 500 players that we get every day by 20, and you'll find how many you have to spread all over the games per mod. So that's not even nearly enough. What I would suggest is doing a modding space schedule where modding space randomly selects a mod per day, and then each day it refreshes that mod. So like one day you can play racing, but only racing, and the other day you can play Juice Series and so on. That would funnel all the players into one mod and just make everybody have a great time.
I think that's a great idea.
Oh, and
Yeah, I agree.
stop confusing alpha and beta, because alpha is when we only could import ships, and beta is where we are now. Just a clarification on that.
So if I could just cut in here real quick, I think this is sort of getting into the fact that you got to remember that the major and basically the majority of the Starblast demographic is pretty much kids, because let's face it, that is like the major majority of the game's players, and a lot of kids, they just can't. They have a short attention span. A lot of people don't have time, especially kids. They just can't sit through the tutorials that we got, because basically whenever the beta version came out, I remember they just gave us a Google Docs thing, and that was basically for people that already understood, prior to whatever experience they had, who already understood, what that meant. But a lot of kids, they're just not willing to put the time in to learn that sort of thing. They got a short attention span. So I remember that was basically the inspiration of me coming out with my tutorial on the beta version. Basically, I made the most basic tutorial I could think of. I made it short, I made it simple, and I made it that somebody of any age could watch it and understand it. Yes, this is how you're gonna make a ship. And by the end of the video, I made it very, very clear. This is how you make a ship and test it in the beta version. So that was kind of like my part of sort of helping out with getting more people into modding and learning how to use, these scripts and everything. But even I myself am not I'm not very skilled in this area. So it's going to take someone a lot more than just me to sort of come up with a better kid-friendly tutorial that most everyone can understand. And I think that's where another major problem lies, is because, again, by the time the alpha version came out, a lot of people were still sort of fumbling around with the beta version. But I mean, of course, Finalizer and Clinum came out with their series of ships, and that was a major success on their part, but not everyone was at that point yet. And so this is why I think the alpha version should have waited until more people were comfortable creating their own ships and everything like that, to the point where they were more comfortable with the program. And then at that point, once more people were comfortable with that, then they could have released the alpha version. Because pretty much, I remember me and Finalizer did that interview. We talked about where the mods were going at the time, and then the next thing I knew, the alpha version was out, and I took my leave. I had to leave for a couple months because I was moving. Then I came back, and then everything was out. It's like everything that they were saving, they just released all of it, And I felt like the community didn't know what to do after that. Like they did, I don't know. And maybe you guys can give more insight onto this, since I wasn't really around to see what happened during those 2 months. And maybe you guys can sort of explain what was going on with the developers' decisions and basically making the decision to release all of it out. Because I have no idea what that must have been like.
Well, in my opinion, the only bad decision is, I must admit, the modding space, it was a bit too early and had a bit too many mods in it. And the player base split, and we got games with 3-4 players in them.
Yeah, right now Battle Royale has like 2 players in it right now. Racing has 5. However, U-Series and Alien Intrusion respectively have 105 and 58 players right now. But one thing I'd like to say about modding and the mods that are available right now is that I feel personally, I don't want to sound pessimistic here, but I feel like a tutorial is not exactly enough for someone to be able to create a really high level quality mod. But however, going off of that, stuff like the U series and Goldman's ship tree and Kleinum's ship tree, stuff like that, ship trees are much easier thing, or a much easier thing to learn for users who don't know how to mod, but are slightly able to create ships in the editor. But again, the issue is it's just ship trees. Then I mean, sure, it's a mod, but it's somewhat repetitive, I guess, in the sense that it's just ship trees, and there's just no major game mechanics or user interfaces or just completely unique deviations off of the game, like just making something absolutely insane that doesn't look like Starblast at all, using modding. And it's really hard to do something like that without having a lot of programming knowledge, or at least knowing how to use stuff like Java, CoffeeScript, that sort of thing.
Well, that's going to be a reality no matter what modding space you're in, because modding is kind of a hacker space kind of hobby anyways.
Man, it's also kind of like a whole different type of language you're messing with. You first just gotta start off with the basics, and then as you get up to that level, like you completely mastered like modding ships, you could get on to making complete new game modes and ship trees at the same time, which would take a lot of practice and months of time.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna mind if I talk about the U series for a bit here?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So after the U series got released to modding space and became a much bigger thing, the one thing I immediately did after its release was I just played game after game, watched YouTube video after YouTube video of the U series to see how could I balance this game to make it more fun for all of the players that are enjoying it. And so I've been constantly just writing down little notes here and there about all of the various ships, and also not only taking into account what advice I've received from personal messages, emails, that sort of thing. I keep in mind who is emailing you, like whether this person is a very experienced player and knows exactly what they're doing, and has helped the developers in balancing the normal ships in Star Blast, or a person who's just got frustrated from that one match where the U Arsenals just absolutely wrecked their base. But yeah, so the U series, I feel like partially why it became so successful is how fun it is to play. The gameplay is so much faster than the normal vanilla modes that it just goes by. It's really quick, it's really intense, and you have to be very careful in order, and like there's real strategy involved towards winning a match. And although there are some strategies where it's like you just all get the U walls or whatever the deviations are of that, and just bum rush the base. It's not always going to be that way when when it's two uncoordinated teams going against each other. But again, what I feel like made the U series so successful is just every ship just has some sort of unique ability for it, and that has never been seen in the entire Star Blast game. And it just uses that uniqueness to make it so much more fun. But yeah, that's pretty much most that I had to say about it.
Well, the thing about the U series is that one reason I believe it was so successful, because pretty much right from the beginning, it was a huge deal, because, and here's why. I think it is a huge deal just because, there's power behind loading some ammo. It's just so satisfying to be behind a ship that is just so incredibly powerful, and you're in a match where every other ship is so much more powerful, unlike the original ships that the game had, from the Fly all the way up to the Ares, Odyssey, and things like that. The original ship tree, these were just, almost revolutionary because the original ships that we've had right from the very beginning weren't that powerful. I mean, the most we had was, we had the U Sniper, the Y Defender, O Defender, ships like that really packed a punch. But we never really had a series of ships that where everything packed a punch, and a really big one also. So that's why I believe it was so popular, and why I still believe it will always continue to be as popular as it has been. Is just because there's so much power to it, and it's just so incredibly satisfying to be in an environment like that.
Yeah, one other thing I'd like to add about it is that when I developed it, I wanted to make sure that the higher tier ships were not entirely dominant over the lower tiers, and that the lower tiers had, if they grouped together, they would be able to defeat some of the higher tier ships, especially the tier 7s, which I guess in the past, during the initial development, were absolutely insanely overpowered and had no chance of being destroyed by any other ship. But as I progressed through just balancing the game, they became a bit more defeatable. Although if you have a team of a certain type of ship, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit overpowered. And I've tried, especially with the U Smasher, that was an enormous problem. But I managed, through reading tons of comments and Reddit posts about it, I finally managed, with help, you did help me out on this, Uranus. I added a small little anti-team ramming mechanic to it, and vastly improved the overall quality of the game, I believe. But yeah, again, listening to user input towards how to just like little small game changes that can really make the difference towards those matches really helps make the game much more fun. But again, going back to having those higher tier ships that are able to be defeated by the lower tiers, though not entirely. Goldman's ships, they're really good. I don't have any problem against them, but in the matches that I've played, there is a significant balancing issue with some of the higher tier ships. I was in a group of very skilled players, and the other team got to the next tier, and it was like tier 5 versus tier 6. And a maxed tier 6 ship was able to defeat 5 tier 5 ships at once, which I was completely flabbergasted at, because no ship should be able to decimate a team that quickly, especially an experienced team such as that. However, in the U series, what I've tried to do is just, again, make sure that the ships are not completely indestructible. And although the ships are what's known as OP, they would just absolutely destroy everything in the regular Starblast modes. I want to be able to, like, levels of OP. I want to make sure that each ship has a different level of overpoweredness to it, so that they balance each other out and you can have a really fun match. And again, and I guess in addition to that, some of the other ships that I designed for the U series, such as the circle perimeter ones with guns facing every which way direction, in reality, those ships were absolutely it would be completely useless had I not added these little mechanics or little adjustments where the front cannon fired more than every other cannon, because otherwise it's completely impossible to aim with that ship. But it's just, I try my best to listen to the community's opinions and make the adjustments needed to make that mode much more fun for everybody.
May I shift the topic for a second and just point out a funny thing that as of now on More in Space we have 2 ship trees which are built by community. We have 2 interactive modes, which are built by devs, and we have 0 interactive modes that have been built by the community. So, like, it's I didn't understand this.
You run like a full robot.
Yeah,
Yeah, your audio is kind of cutting out there a little.
but yeah,
Simulated by the board. Ooh, hey, if I can use this opportunity to jump in, though, something that I thought was missing from the integration of the currently available modding space is, well, I've been agitating for an overhaul of how mining works, but I don't think that that sort of thing is supported by the code that you can put into the mod editor at current. And that's something that I was really hyped about modding for, was that it would be possible to playtest my idea of how mining should feel in the main game. And that's really something that's kind of missing from modding spaces. Is it's not versatile enough yet for what really needs to change in the game to really make it a more interactive experience.
yeah, and if I could bounce off of
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so right now, again, what you were saying, on modding space, there are not as many, I guess, we could really use some user interface or just game engine changing mods on modding space that would completely change the entire feel of Starblast. But right now, all of those modes are just 100% purely Starblast. But yeah, Uranus has been developing some incredible just modding tools, and not only that, but just changes to the game engine that makes Starblast not feel like Starblast anymore, but rather something entirely different and unique.
All right.
Can I take
Yeah,
over?
yeah.
So, if I may, there are many features that should have been implemented, like straight away, day one. Like, I don't want to shit on the devs, if I may say that, but like, there are so many features that should have been implemented before other features, like control over gems, control over credits, control over bases. I don't know.
Oh
it just
yeah,
feels
those
like
especially.
there are many things that could have made. The ship trees, you cannot customly wire your ship trees. You cannot make pulse fighter upgrade into bad defender or fucking pioneer on the right hand of the tree. You cannot do that as of now. And there are many features that just outside of modding that also could have been implemented long ago and should have been implemented long ago. For example, ship editor rotations. We cannot rotate things by x-axis and the z-axis. We can only rotate around the y-axis, which is really limiting and is really slowing down the ship editing. And I don't know, it's just. And by the way, the my last mod, Starblast Prototypes, which was like, I was really hoping it would be a huge thing, and it was very disappointing for me to see nobody care about it. I know I feel I sound a bit salty, but I am, because it's the first mod that allowed for custom ship abilities, which isn't that cool, but nobody cares.
I think this sort of gets back to what we were saying earlier, is that I just think the community really wasn't ready for the alpha version and all the new game modes that were coming out. I just think the community as a whole just wasn't ready. I think the idea was a little bit ahead of its time, but if had they waited a little longer to release all this, then I think it would have been a much bigger success than it has been. But the thing now is, the question that we have to ask now, I mean, what can we do about it? I mean, there's not a whole lot that can be done about it now. I mean, it's not like we can expect to just the developers to just take it all back, because then what's that going to lead to? That'll probably lead to some sort of turmoil amongst the community, because uh, I'm certain that there's going to be that a great percentage of the community is going to be like, wait, what just happened? Why did you take these away? Uh, well, there may be some people who might feel differently. So I feel like the game and the developers have kind of backed themselves into a corner. And I think it's now up to the community as a whole to sort of decide what we're going to do from.
Hey, how much longer are we doing this? Because it's really late here.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. I was gonna have you guys give some last thoughts, and then I was gonna get into the. I was gonna try and wrap this up. So, do you guys have any thoughts on what I said?
Yeah, I have one.
Alright, go ahead.
Okay, so if Starblast were to be featured by some major streamer or YouTuber, I mean, I know Fady covered the game a while back, but didn't do as much as we were hoping. Like something like Markiplier, probably not PewDiePie, but whatever. But if we manage to dramatically increase the player base for this game, that would be an absolute game changer. And perhaps something like, or stuff like modding space and these other new mods would come out much more often as more people become involved with the community. It's just more people. If we suddenly got a huge influx of people, that would absolutely change the game. But yeah, as of now, we don't have the right number of people for something like this to be supported. And I feel like modding space could be benefited if it were turned back into an event. However, I feel like there should be something done like a poll or just like a straw me or a survey monkey poll asking the entire Starblast community, perhaps featured on the Starblast intro page or
Yes.
home page, asking if the community would like modding space to be an event or remain as it is, a permanent thing. And it would be a hard question to ask because I know quite a few people would not like to see the major mods suddenly become an event again when developers clearly said, oh, this is now a permanent thing. But I feel like because of our current numbers, it would benefit from something like this.
Yeah, I agree. You can go ahead, Uranus.
I absolutely hate the idea of modding space becoming an event, which happens every day of, some day of the week, every week. Mainly because some people can't play Starblast on that day, and I suggested the modding space is available all the time, but one mod per day.
Yeah, something or some alteration like that. That would work as well.
One more per day sounds good.
Sorry, guys, I'm going out. So yeah, thanks for talking.
Wait, can you stick around? I was just getting ready to wrap this up, so if you could just stick around for the end. Do you think you can stick around for maybe like 5 more minutes? I was literally just getting ready to wrap this up. So
okay.
All right. So I think it's we're getting about around the end of this little conference that we were having. So assuming that the developers are going to hear, and hopefully they do, is I think a good way to close this is by sort of maybe stating some changes that we would like to see in the game. I think a change that I would like to see is maybe the unnerfing of a lot of the ships, because I remember I was playing a game yesterday literally for the first time ever since I returned from my leave, and I remember thinking to myself, what happened to a lot of these ships? I was in the side fighter, and I don't remember the side fighter being that weak, and then I moved up to the side interceptor, and same thing. I feel like something has changed. Like, is it just me, or have a lot of the ships gotten weaker? I don't remember that. Maybe it's because U series that a lot of these ships have seemed weaker now. But I feel like a lot of nerfs have kind of like taken over the ships, and I'm not really happy about that. So one change that I would like to see in the future is maybe like the unnerfing of a lot of the ships. So you guys can also go ahead, also maybe state some of your opinions. That
Uh,
Well, that is something of a perfect segue into an idea that I was going to comment regarding modding, especially is what I personally saw in modding as a potential for the game was the some kind of a combat council of players who have been playing the game for a long time, working to tweak ships to create popular balance proposals, and to be with the existing ships was something that's severely lacking in the attitude around modding currently. Is like people aren't working on tweaks for the core game, they're working on their total overhaul offshoots of the game, which is cool, but it diminishes the focus on the core game, which I think is still in need of work from both the community and the developers.
One thing I'd like to see added is the rate of fire limiter currently installed in the modding be increased. So right now it's set to 10, meaning that any ship with a rate of fire being set higher than 10, so let's say something like 20, automatically gets decreased to the default 10, and the damage and recoil is increased respectively. However, I think Uranus suggested this number a while ago because it would work. Increasing it to 60 would help make modding quite a bit more fun, because ships that spam really crazy, spam absolutely insane numbers of bullets are really fun to work with. But the issue with that is that really spam-heavy ships end up dragging down the server's CPU, which in turn lowers the ping on quite a few other people's servers. And that's the problem with having such a high rate of fire within ships. However, I feel like we would significantly benefit from having a higher limiter, because, again, it just makes it more fun. And like Uranus said yesterday, 60 frames per, or 60 steps per second is pretty much the maximum for this game, so it would work perfectly.
For me, an idea that I would like to see is just the wide offender to be buffed again, and I think it should just have to get rid of the anti-teaming thing. That would be a huge help.
I think it would be kind of nice if all ships across the board were faster and the gaps in ship speeds were greater, on the basis of which ships are faster innately now. The comparative gaps in speeds were different, but also maybe the possibility of a no friction mode where all the top speeds are gone and ships accelerate up at the rate of their acceleration out to, in theory, infinite speed. But also, something that I was talking about before we actually started to record this was the idea of a casual mode, which would kind of capture what people think survival mode is supposed to be, where people can kind of impromptu team or not team, go it alone, and they could kind of get to grips with the game better, because it's more open-ended and there's not a winner that's dragging down a game and closing the lobby abruptly.
So kind of like a training session then?
We have tutorial, though.
Well, the tutorial is great and all. It could certainly see a lot of improvement, but also it doesn't pit you against other players, and it's not very complicated, the scenarios that you could end up with to practice shooting at things and moving targets and such. They're not complicated enough to really challenge a person to grow their skill. So then they jump into a game, and somebody like me or Loveship or Finalizer, who has been playing the game forever, is going to wipe the floor with you, and that's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, if I could just cut in real quick, because I want to keep this under a certain time limit. maybe we can get back to that another time. Maybe maybe we can even do it like a part 2 or something. But for now, I think we should just wrap things up. And I think maybe to try to at least end like on a positive note, for anyone who's listening, I just want to make a quick statement. In the end, isn't it just about having fun? I mean, really, we just have the best games, the audience and really everybody's best interest at heart. And really, the game is just about having fun. We're only making these discussions because we care about the game as a whole, and we want the game to be fun for everybody. So we're not like just sitting here complaining about this. We honestly do like want to see improvements for the good of the game and for the good of the community. And I think if some of us do disagree with certain points about some of the updates, the moddings, I think one thing we all can agree on is that in the end, it's just about having fun and just playing the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're gonna go ahead and end this, guys. If you guys
I want to see more serious business team.
Finalizer announcement. I will continue making mods. I hope to be published maybe 1 or 2 by the end of this year. Other mods, which probably will get featured in Modding Space anyways. But one to look out for definitely is pirate mode. I hope to be working on that fairly soon after I finish building this very special ship model. But again, and I guess I'm going to reference back to what I said earlier towards ship build, or at least the people who are able to build ships and mods, not having enough time in real life to just do this sort of thing. I mean, I'm going to try my best to see if I can have time to build this sort of thing, but definitely expect some more mods and ships from me.
All right. Does anybody else have any other announcements? And also, if you have any plugs, like if you have any, like an Instagram or a YouTube or something, I'll let you guys shout those out. So you guys can go ahead and shout out any plugs that you have. Feel free to do so. Anybody?
I will. So you guys can go ahead and sub to my YouTube channel, just_Kyle. It's mainly a Minecraft channel, but hopefully in the future, as I get better at Starblast, I'll start posting both Minecraft and Starblast. So just stay tuned for that and subscribe, please.
And Double K?
My plugs will be down in the description of my side of the video.
Yeah, and I'll definitely link your YouTube channel. Finalizer, Carm, do you guys have anything?
I got nothing.
Your boy Carme here is working on a project to get people to fire torpedoes in synchronous on a base, and if we can pull that off, it'll change the meta of the game, and the consequences will never be the same.
All right, guys.
Wow.
So until next time that we meet again, I'm your boy ATK. Thank you guys for all joining me. This has been awesome, and maybe we can get together again sometime and talk about more updates. And if another major update comes out, then I'm pretty certain that you guys can count on us getting back together again and talking about that. So thank you for joining us for this conversation, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.